Kamal bhai, you will be giving me a cue when I need to start.
We are live on YouTube and we shall be live in like 1 minute on YouTube as well. So we are live on Zoom right now.
All right, fantastic. We are live on Zoom. Good afternoon to everyone on Zoom, to all hosts and all friends. So we are just waiting for 1 more minute to go, and then we go live on YouTube as well. Dr. Kamal, do let me know.
We're live on YouTube as well. You may formally start, Pradeep sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kamal. And good afternoon and namaskar to all wonderful hosts and friends, not only on Zoom, but also on YouTube. My name is Pradeep Mazumdar, and I shall be the host this afternoon from Shoolini University. I serve the university in the capacity of Director for School of Hospitality. And it is an honor for me today to be able to invite an absolutely fabulous speaker in the form of my very dear schoolmate, Mr. Farooq Siddiqui. Just a little introduction to Mr. Farooq Siddiqui before I go into any of his professional achievements. Considering the fact that we have been school friends for many, many years, I can only tell all my audience members that you will be listening to a small Napoleon Bonaparte. A Napoleon Bonaparte who packs in a punch in a small physical frame, which you will not see his physical frame, but you will hear him. Mr. Siddiqui is, as we call him very fondly, Farooq, is an international banker, a topper in chartered accountancy examination, a complete brain in finance, and has been working for nearly 2.5 decades with first ANZ Grindlays Bank and then Standard Chartered Bank. Currently the CEO of CEO Asia Pacific for the Falcon Group, which is headquartered in London, although Farooq currently is based out of Singapore. Now, it must be very surprising to everyone, School of Hospitality, why is it hosting an international banker? The reason for that is that what Farooq brings to the table is way above banking, is way above finance. Farooq has been writing for the last 20 years, that's what he tells me. But from 11th of August 2019 is when I have been reading blogs written by Farooq. Thus far, I have read 5 of his blogs, and every one of his blog has kept me thinking, has triggered me off to a long train of thought. I requested Farooq to please come on our show today and speak about his latest blog, which is Born Again. Ladies and gentlemen, and my dear, dear students, I give you my very, very dear, respected friend, Farooq Siddiqui. Farooq, all over to you.
Thank you, Pradeep. It's a pleasure being joined live with all of your students and others around the world, I guess. So before I kick off, I just want to say a few things. Number one, whatever I say, take it with a pinch of salt. It's purely my views. I don't bring any superior wisdom to what you all have. It's really the sum total of my own experiences and reflections that I've had. The second thing which I want to say is that what I'm basically going to talk about is really about how do we reorient ourselves in the current world of COVID-19. And I'm sure it's a topic we all have been discussing amongst ourselves. How does business models change? How do we evolve? And what does life in the COVID-19 era mean? And like many of you who have been working from home or have been studying from home, I've had time to reflect on this particular topic. And I put a small blog out recently, which Pradeep is referring to, which I titled Born Again. So my own reflection on this whole concept of born again is that as COVID-19 comes into our lives, we need to start not just thinking about this as a big change or to start thinking about this as a big disruption. I think we need to start thinking about this as an entirely new book that we will start reading. Not a new chapter, but a completely new book. And in that context, Pradeep, there were really 4 or 5 big reflections that I've had as far as being born again is concerned. And these are really notes to myself that I wanted to share. The first thing was that I really believe that the past way of living, our past life, is in many ways dead. So if it is dead, I think it deserves a decent burial. I think it deserves a good funeral. I think it deserves a good send-off. And we just need to wave it goodbye and say, you know what, the way we lived our life in the past is dead. And I think getting that closure is important before we look ahead. So really the second message I would have is, as you wave your past life goodbye, is just get that closure as far as your past life is concerned. Let it go. So yes, there are lots of things we are attached to. We are human by nature. Yes, there are a lot of things that we actually hold very dear to our heart. What I would request is to think about the things that you've learned, think about what your report card of your last life looks like, but then give it a good send off, say it farewell, and move forward. You are not going to move forward till you say your goodbyes. And I think getting closure is important. It's an emotional experience, but it's really important to get that closure. And as you start thinking about your new life, I think it's also important to say, what do we make different in our new life? So if we only bring our past life into our new life, it doesn't really change anything. So in my opinion, I think that new life means we need to rethink what our life goals ought to be. We need to rethink what our priorities are going to look like. We need to rethink what's really important. And it's a fantastic way to restart because we are all in that same boat, but really the people who can internalize what is going to be new about their life in terms of priorities, life goals, what is important to them, what they value, is where I think you will get more meaning into this aspect of your life. So this whole concept about rethinking your North Star, rethinking what actually you will hold dear is very important because that's the life game you're going to play and you need to abide by these new rules. So I almost imagine, Pradeep, that this is what I'm calling life 2.0. And I'm imagining that we are now almost on another planet. This is the first year of life 2.0. We are little infants in this life 2.0, but we bring a lot of our past history with us. And as we kind of embark on this life 2.0 experience, I think it's important to ditch a lot of the baggage that we carry. I think it's important for us to look at things afresh. And it's also important at the same time to recognize that it's a strange new world. And any strange new world will bring its share of fears and anxiety. And that's the biggest thing, I think, on a personal level, we need to be comfortable with. You can't shy away from the fear. You can't just wish anxiety goodbye. But certainly you need to kind of hold it in your hand and say, you know what, fear and anxiety we are all feeling. But our ability to cope with that fear and anxiety is really what's going to distinguish us from the rest of the pack. So the key thing I would really focus on is what emotions are currently at play, what emotions do you actually control, and the fact that you have a real choice to make. You have a choice to make to say, you know what, I'm going to wimp out. You have a choice to make to say, you know what, I'm going to choose to feel overwhelmed. You have a choice to say, I'm really sad that my life as I knew it is over. Or you have a choice to make to say, you know what, I'm going to come out of this as a winner. You have a choice to make to say, you know what, I do have control on my mental faculty and I'm going to do something more about it. And really, I think that's the piece I would really focus on. So, you know, we can't solve all the world's problems, but we can certainly solve for what is within us. And I think what lies within our gift is our ability to make the choice and to have the wherewithal to actually treat this as a new version or a new future altogether.
When you really say that you want to give it a decent burial, is it really possible for people to leave all that baggage behind? Because habits die hard. Farooq, it's not so easy to let go of the past, considering the fact that we are all used to acclimatize to that sort of a living. What do you have to say to that? How does a person change gears?
So Pradeep, I look at it, and I'm going to probably just plagiarize one of my earlier blogs to answer your question, which is really around how do you, this is a massive disruption that we are facing, right? So you're facing an extreme change, you're facing a huge amount of disruption. So how do you personally deal with a change which is so monumental? And I think when you think about bringing it into certain specific things that you can do in terms of driving disruption within yourself, something has to change. So, if you think about it as an input output equation, if nothing is going to change in the input, your output, which is how you see things, how you deal with stuff, will not change. So what is it that we can change on the input side to have a different output, to have a different reaction, to have a different outcome? And the things which strikes me is, number one is we need to disrupt our existing routine. We are creatures of routine, we are creatures of habit, and we have a defined way of doing something. So if you think about your day, you do X number of things during the day, you do it in a particular way. You need to think about what new element in your routine are you adding. So if your day goes exactly the same as it is in the things that you spend your time on, and if you're not going to change what you spend your time on, you are not going to get any fresh inputs into rethinking yourself. So I really think, practically speaking, you've got to really think about where are you spending your time on, number one. Second is, I would say, you've got to focus on the company that you keep. So again, if your company is exactly the same, you hang out with the same people, you talk the same language, you only discuss a certain set of stuff which you're comfortable with people that you are comfortable with, you are not going to get any fresh inputs into it. So I think disrupting your company and actively seeking out new connections and people who are different to you, or in different professions, who bring a different mindset, who bring a different view of life. I think it's important to get that fresh thinking to help shake you out of your current zone. And it all relates to then how do you change your mindset? And that's really, you kind of think about mindset as these neural highways that have been hard-coded in our brains. So changing mindset, in my opinion, really means that you've got to have that sense of awareness that you are looking at things in a particular fashion or from a particular viewpoint. And I think it goes back to if you have that degree of self-awareness to say that your mindset is in a certain way, other people may look at things, but look at it differently. And the totality of the truth lies in looking at the full picture rather than your own view of things. It becomes really important. So what I would say is we all have what I would describe a closed mindset. And the older you get, the more it becomes rigid. You've got to start opening that mindset up. So you've got to keep asking yourself or re-questioning yourself in terms of the mindset that you're bringing to things. Is it different? Are you challenging your mindset? Because I absolutely believe if you can't change your mindset, Pradeep, you can't drive any of the change that we are talking about. And mindset is also related to your comfort zone. And what I mean by comfort zone is if you don't feel that fear in your stomach, if you don't feel that you are going into the land of ignorance, then actually you're missing the point. So if you feel very comfortable with things, whether it's with people, whether it's a situation, whether it's a profession, if you feel overly comfortable, I think you are reaching that stage where that comfort zone is going to kill you. And you'll be like that little frog who's sitting on that frying pan, which heats very slowly, and you're not going to feel it till you get completely zapped by the fire. So I think that sense of comfort. So if you are feeling too comfortable, especially in today's scenario, I think you're missing the point. So if you're feeling anxious and you're feeling that little bit of pain in your stomach about anxiety, it's actually a good thing, because it means that your body and your senses are telling you that it's time to actually do something with it. So you've got to, instead of leaning out on things that you are not comfortable with, you need to lean into it. So whether it's with new people, whether it's with new situations, your natural reaction is to kind of step out. I would advocate step in. The more you step in, the more comfort you're going to finally derive. And the last thing I would say in the context of your question is think about your own brand, Pradeep. If you are known for something, so you might be known as a great hotelier, you might be known as a great people person, you've got to fixate on what should be that brand of yours looking like in Life 2.0. What should that brand be? Because that becomes kind of your goal in terms of how you're going to build up your life to it. So I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for all of us to kind of actually start afresh. And it's all going to depend upon the mindset. It's going to depend upon making that conscious choice. And we should not forget it is a conscious choice that we are making in terms of how we choose to respond.
You know, find a lot of resonance in what you say. I've been thinking when you were talking, I'd like to mention my Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Atul Khosla, who's an extremely accomplished professional consultant. He's an ex-IIT Kanpur and he's an ex-McKinsey. And one of the words which I kind of have internalized from him is he always uses the word disruption. And I kind of realized that disruption is pretty much synonymous with getting out of your comfort zone. Pretty much the same. Yeah. He always talks about the same thing, exactly what you talk about, that challenge the unknown. The point here is that you are advocating a complete mental framework metamorphosis, complete change of mental framework. Now, I'd like to look at it from two angles. The age angle. On the one hand, you also mentioned that those of us who have reached a certain age, whilst in our journey through life, we have also become more and more rigid. We may find it very difficult to open that door. While I deal with young people all the time, my wonderful student fraternity, they are between the age group of, let us say, 18 to 21 years of age. They have already had 21 to, let's say on an average 20 years of their life. They have seen life in a certain different angle. How do you equate, how easy, to ask a very simple question, how easy is it going to be for them to open the door and difficult for us to open the door?
So I think, Pradeep, what you're really talking about is this whole thing about learning. And given that we're talking to a lot of students here, I'll pick up this whole topic of learning, because I think learning as a way of life and being a permanent student all your life, whether you're 20 or whether you're 100, is the way to go. And therefore, the question is, how do you pursue this goal of being a lifelong student? You know, so in the initial phase of your life, you pursue what I call technical skills, because you need to get that professional expertise. And over a period of time, that technical skills morph into what I call life skills or soft skills. And that life skills and that unique combination of life skills and technical skills is what shapes you, not just as a professional, but sometimes and often as a human being. And I think what people find is, when we talk about technical skills, is you have a particular curriculum, you got exams, you get assessed. So it's kind of easy to rate how you do on technical skills. But when you talk about life skills, there is no kind of formal examination done. Only you can figure out how well you are doing on that. And I think, therefore, what are some of the things I would reflect on to become a permanent learner in life? I think there are 3 or 4 things I would probably point out. The first is you can't learn new stuff without unlearning old stuff. And I think that's really important, because the older you get, what happens is you equate your sense of wisdom or your gray hairs and knowledge to the sum total of your experiences. But often experiences are not a great pointer towards how to deal with a new situation or to deal with something which is completely different to what you've experienced. So often you can't learn anything new till you can actually unlearn what you have learned in the past. And that whole concept of unlearning and relearning, I think, is not a vicious circle, but actually a virtuous circle. So you've got to actually reflect back and say, what aspects of stuff that I've learned actually is not fit for the future, fit for purpose anymore, and have the ability to let go. So the first thing I would advocate is unlearn and relearn. Second thing I will say, this for the older folks on around the Zoom call, is having the humility to learn afresh. See, what happens, I think, Pradeep, with age is you kind of feel you know it all. And the moment you kind of get into that zone that you know it all, it's actually a really dangerous place to be in, because you are now completely arrogant and you don't have the humility to say that, you know what, I actually need to also learn. So the moment you get that feeling where that you know everything, you've got to give yourself a big kick on your butt and say, you know what, get out of that zone, because in that sense of arrogance, you will not learn. Learning requires humility. Learning requires acknowledgement that you don't know. If you don't have that acknowledgement, you will never learn. So the second thing really is to practice humility while learning. The third thing which I would probably pick up is the joy of being ignorant. You know, the reason why they say ignorance is bliss, there's a particular reason for that. And I think too many of us feel very vulnerable because of our ignorance. I actually say ignorance is the virtue, ignorance is the strength. Ignorance is what gives you the mental and the spiritual framework to actually imbibe new stuff to come in. Because unless you completely feel ignorant, you don't have any yearning or desire to actually learn. So I think we shouldn't hide our ignorance. We should acknowledge our ignorance, but do something about it. So it's not good enough to be ignorant. It's to acknowledge your ignorance and to use ignorance as a way to actually start learning again. The last thing that I will say is that as we switch from technical skills to life skills, each one of us, no matter where we are in our life, need what I would call a personal learning agenda. And that's where it again brings it back to you as an individual. You need to have the discipline of setting a personal learning plan for yourself for the year. You need to have a way of judging how well you've done on your personal goals. You need to have a way to keep resetting it. And I think what distinguishes successful people from others is people who just build that discipline of saying, I'm not satisfied with what I am. There's more that I can learn. There's always more capacity to do. And I genuinely want to be a better version of my current self. So one thing which I would kind of, in the context of Life 2.0, one of the challenges I would put to all of us is what's version 2.0 of ourselves going to look like? So we are assuming we are version 1 today. What does version 2 of each of one of us looks like 6 months or 12 months down the line? Do we have a vision of what we would look like? And what would we do to actually deliver on that vision? And I think if we have that personal plan for ourselves and we have the discipline of doing something about it, then I think we're kind of going down the right path.
So when you really talk about PLP, I call it personal learning plan, PLP. Yeah. So how important do you think it is to have a mentor in these type of trying times?
See, I think two heads are always better than one. And Pradeep, I will definitely tell you that I have immensely benefited from having had some phenomenal teachers and bosses through my life. And I will absolutely acknowledge that whatever we are today is the sum total of inputs that we have received from various people. And I'm a strong advocate of basically having people, some of them might be your soulmate, some of them might just be a teacher, but having somebody who can help you along the way. And often what you find is that when you air certain things, when you are able to articulate it with people, you are able to come up with a slightly better thinking around it. So I actually believe that a mentor is a great way to kind of help you on that life journey.
Farooq, in your last 3 decades of working life, if I were to ask you differentiate between a mentor and a coach, how would you address this query?
Yeah.
A mentor and a coach from your own life examples.
Yeah. So the way I would look at it is that, you know, a mentor is somebody who you basically look to bounce off stuff with you, who gives you actual advice in terms of making certain choices of a career, making certain choices that you might need to make. Whereas a coach is often somebody who will help you become a better version of things that is troubling you. So often coaching is, in my opinion, is really about somebody helping you either address certain weaknesses that you might have or vulnerabilities that you have, or help you see yourself slightly differently. I don't personally see that much of a difference, but the key thing for me is going to be around the ability of having somebody who you can bounce things off, who can therefore give you that needed career advice.
Talking about vulnerability, today's youngsters, ever since February, March of 2020, are feeling extremely vulnerable. And I completely associate with that viewpoint, especially for graduating batches. For batches who are waiting to go out into the big world of opportunity, suddenly they are looking at far reduced opportunities. In a situation like that, what would be your advice to keep their chins up?
So listen, I think first thing first is let's acknowledge that we are at a stage where it is a difficult situation. So if anybody says, you know what, this is not happening, or you can just wish it away or ignore it, that is not going to happen, number one. Number two, what I would say, Pradeep, is that I think it's the important thing is to bring it back to what do you at an individual level control. So, I mean, you realize that actually in life, you don't control much. You only control how you choose to respond to something. So number one, what I would say is have a plan. Okay. So if you are just sitting around wishing that things are going to get well, or somebody's going to kind of take you out of your lurch, then I think you're kind of missing the point. So I think having a plan, owning a plan, doing something with the plan, flexing the plan is really, really important. I also feel that, we are now talking, the word which is coming up increasingly in today's lexicon is the word resilience. So it is really about how do you individually build resilience or self-resilience. So if you look at the word resilience and what does it actually encapsulate? Resilience is the ability to deal with adversity and make that adversity a virtue. So the first thing is the experiencing of adversity. So it's all right. So if people are feeling, hey, you know what, I don't know what the future holds in store for me. I had all of these plans for myself, which I'm not sure they're going to work out. And that's that sense of adversity which people are facing. Some people are facing it at a real life and death scenario. Some people are facing it from a livelihood perspective. Some people are facing it just in terms of what does it mean for me next. But I think that word resilience, if you can really internalize it to say, I have to come out of this situation resilient, which means that I will internalize this adversity. I will, however, be determined to do something that is under my control. So bring it. So what is in my control is I have a choice to study this. I have a choice to apply for these jobs. I have a choice to connect more with people. I have a choice to rethink what I want to do. So bring it back to yourself. I think we lose control when we kind of just abdicate that to the general environment and we hope that something is going to improve. If you bring it control back into yourself to say, it's something I will take ownership of. Maybe I'm not going to succeed all the time, but when you get that sense of control, you become more resilient. And I think that's really important today.
Do you really feel control is in man's hands? I want to qualify my this statement a little more. Very often we speak about these words that man makes his own destiny. Sounds very good, especially when the going is good. It sounds really wonderful, man makes his own destiny. But the converse happens when everything is in the doldrums, then we don't really use this sentence very much, man makes his own destiny. Why this dichotomy then?
So listen, I'm not a philosopher, but Pradeep, what I will say is that I think it's a mix of both. I think, yes, a lot of things may be fated and, in the broader scheme of things, we are little specks in the cosmos. But the key, in my opinion, is to bring it back to what is it that man controls. And the only thing that a man controls is his mental ability to respond to things. That's basically, we actually don't control, we just control our mind. We don't even control our body because, if we fall sick and that's something which might just happen. So the only thing you actually control is your brains and your mind. And I think we've got to make it a life goal to say that the way I exercise my mind, whether it's the way I make choices and decisions, whether it's around how I do stuff, whether it is around how determined I am, it's all a function of my own mental makeup. So yes, the situation is a given. I can't do much about the situation, but I always have a choice of, do I panic in the situation, or do I say I'm going to give it my best shot, or am I just going to, lie up, belly up and say, this is it. And, let this be the end. And I don't have anything. And I think very often we sometimes lack that discipline of saying this choice of what to do lies with me. Yes, a lot of the choices may result in failures. Yes, a lot of the choices may result in nothing to show. Very often there's a huge amount of effort which is put in with zero output to show. My personal belief is that we often don't control the outcome. We do not control the output. We control the input. So the input is basically you, yourself, your thinking, your action, your mindset. That is all within your control. Output, you know what? It is a function of so many things, including luck and circumstances, which you don't control. You got to be able to stand up and look at your report card on inputs and say, how well have I done on my inputs? Yes, in life, often we measure life by output, but I would say your personal life is measured on input, which is really what is the effort and stuff that I have put in. And if I stand up and say, you know what, I've been a lazy bugger and I've done nothing on it, then frankly, I'm the one to blame. But if I can stand up, you know what, I really tried. And here is my own internal inputs that I put in. I think that's a life well lived. That's a life of success, in my opinion.
Beautifully said. Really beautifully said. Reverting a little bit to the vernacular, I don't know whether this is going to reach you there, but one of the things which I always keep telling my students and my fellow colleagues is, प्रयास हमारे हाथ में है, परिणाम नहीं.
Exactly.
I think that's pretty much the same
That's
thing
correct.
what you said.
Yeah.
And there's a lovely question coming through from one of my student colleagues. His name is Baladitya Singh Saklani. He says, Farooq sir, good afternoon. In the present scenario, what different set of skills would you advocate for young generation who are in the midst of witnessing a massive change taking place globally?
I think let me break it up into technical and what I would call the softer skills. So I think if I talk for a moment on business model, then we can take hospitality as a good sector to talk about. I think we know that there are 2-3 fundamental changes which will happen to business models, as you would probably read. Is number one is this whole move to digital. So if you are not a digital native, what I mean to say is you don't know basic programming, you're not comfortable with understanding application on how to use data, for example, or you don't know anything about machine learning or data science. I think in today's day and world, it's an essential technical skill to have. So it doesn't matter whether you are in a service industry or you are in a high-tech firm. I think having that basic understanding of, no, I don't mean the technical aspect of technology, but the application of the technology. And within all of that, the key thing which I would advocate to people is understanding data sciences and the implications of data on businesses and business models, because a lot of our future world is driven by how people interpret data and make business sense out of it. So to me, that would be one core life skill that I would kind of definitely advocate. Coming to what I would call the softer skills. I know we've always spoken about it, Pradeep, but one which I would absolutely advocate in today's world is what I call networking skills. And what I mean by networking skills is, in the good old days, we used to only network within our own network. So if I'm a bunch of bankers, I would typically talk to bankers and we would discuss only banking stuff. But when you think about the future is, as you might know, the future is about convergence. Convergence means where you have this different industries which start intersecting with each other to create new businesses and new industries. So you think about the intersection between, I don't know, technology and telecom, for example, or you think about the intersection between the automobile industry and technology. They are spawning a whole spate of new industries. So I think convergence does not happen in isolation. Convergence happens when you mix and match. So that networking, bringing it back to the networking point, is you've got to start expanding your network beyond people who you typically deal with. So if you're only talking to your batchmates in the hotel sector, you are missing the bigger point, because you know what? Hoteliering is just a service industry like airlines, like retailing. And some of the things happening in those sectors may have implications in your business going forward. So the second skill I would say has to be around networking. The third skill, I think we spoke about it, is that if you had what I would call a learning kind of agenda, you've got to really ramp it up. You've got to ramp up your learning. You've got to become a voracious learner, and you've got to invest time on that on a daily basis, literally, because I think the learning curve is going to be so steep. If you just follow our traditional ways of learning or absorbing or assimilating stuff, I think we're going to miss the picture in terms of actually learning. I also think that there are some very good life skills that we had in Life 1.0, which we need to bring forward into this life. And some of the things which I would advocate is as follows. And these are things which have helped me personally in good stead. And I think they will still relate in Life 2.0. I think number one, I would say, is be yourself. Authenticity of who you are, what you bring to the table is really important, especially in a corporate world where often it's about, what you project and how you look, which people give more importance to. But in a world where a lot of this stuff is what I call make-believe, being authentic and being who you are and being true to your values is really an important and an attractive human trait to be. So people, especially as you get into leadership positions, really appreciate people who are authentic, really people who have a sense of being what they say they are. And that authenticity and living by it, I think is really important. The second thing which I would say is we've spoken about learning. I would also talk about the learning of self-discovery. So if you talk about yourself now, if you don't know what your own strengths are, you're never going to achieve mastery on your strengths. So I think that whole internalizing discovery of yourself to understand who you truly are, and basically then looking at how do you actually leverage on your strengths. Because for many of us, we take our strengths for granted, but we never become masters at any of our strengths. We tend to always focus on weaknesses and we never do anything about it. So I would say that in terms of self-discovery of who you are, what your strengths are, how do you get mastery at it, because that's a God-given gift that you have, is what can distinguish you from the rest of your life, people. The last thing I would say is having the ability to stretch or flex. I think we all realize that we spoke about comfort zones and being on a cocoons, Pradeep, but I think we've now got to stretch ourselves beyond the boundaries of our limitations. So we all live in this little square, which we have drawn in a mental map, saying this is all I can do. I will only be able to play around the edges. I can't go beyond the boundaries of my limitation, which are really stuff which is sitting here in our mind. And I think we've got to stretch ourselves to saying, you know what, there's no harm taking a look at what lies beyond that mental boundary that we've set. And especially for all the youngsters on the call, what I would absolutely advocate is if anybody's told you don't have this quality or you are limited by X, Y, and Z, it's all in your mind. And I think it's much later on in life you realize that it was all in your mind. And I think the earlier you realize that your mental limitation boundary that you've drawn, you can stretch it, you can flex it, you can step out of it. Yes, you might fail a few times, but that's okay. And that's what the fun of a life journey is all about. So those would be some of the things, Pradeep, I would suggest.
Beautifully said. Farooq, you mentioned something very nice. You mentioned two things which I was continuously thinking in our industry of hospitality and service excellence. You talked about digitization and you talked about networking. You know, those of us who have been diehard hoteliers, all our lives, we have always thought of ourselves as touch point professionals. We are very much in the touch business, not in the physical touch, so to say, but more in terms of human to human touch. But today, post COVID-19, it seems that we have all moved to what one of my very dear friends in the Oberoi Hotels, his name is David Matthews, he says, low touch luxury. So we are moving away from that personalization to that low touch luxury. And I have coined my own term to this, that in our type of industry now, the only differentiator is not personalization, but the only differentiator is clinical hospitality. Earlier, we used to talk about responsible luxury, but now I talk about clinical luxury or clinical hospitality. The point that I'm trying to make here is that how successful are we going to be? You have traveled all across different geographies. You have been a guest in so many hotels all across the world. So how do you reconcile yourself to the fact that you don't have any smiling face, but you have just a robot coming and doing your chores? How would you respond to that?
See, I think number one, we don't know what the future will unfold. So right now, everybody is basically speculating on how that is going to be like. And I think, yes, if on a broader sense, as people say, the move towards digital and the move towards technology replacing humans, etc., it may get accentuated as a result of what is happening. But I think at the end of the day, when you think about personal experiences, it's those moments of interaction that you had with people, which you tend
the
to
moments
remember,
of truth, as we call it, yes,
which you remember and you will always treasure, and I don't think that is going to go away. And I actually think that there's this whole concept of what you call human technology, which is how do you marry the best of what human beings bring with the digital tools. I think we get into that debate was human versus technology. In my humble opinion, it's really about how good humans get at using technology as a tool. And I think whether it is the service sector or any other sector for that matter, it will evolve. So I think it's a question of how do you leverage these digital skills to actually accentuate your hospitality skills, as opposed to saying it's going to be the death of personal touch.
Okay, that's a great input. Our dear friend Rajesh Nath has asked a question. what new leadership traits would be required in the new normal due to COVID impact? And he's also asked a second question, is COVID pushing the world slowly moving from globalization to localization?
Okay. I think the second one is easier to answer, and I can talk about it from talking to quite a few corporates all over the world. So I think that shift from globalization to localization, Rajesh, is happening. And it is not just happening because of COVID. It's also happening because of protectionism. It's happening because of a number of reasons beyond COVID. So you are going to see certain sectors move into a more localized environment. It's not that it's going to entirely go away, but certain sectors will become more localized because there are certain benefits around creating local jobs, sourcing locally, reducing supply chain risks, etc., which are going to happen. Does that mean that will China stop being the factory of the world tomorrow? The answer is no. But are you going to see some shift in certain key sectors happen? My personal view is that it will happen, but it's just not COVID. It's a function of technology. So if you think about 3D printing, for example, I can set up a 3D printer at home. I don't need to source a shoe from Italy, for example. So technology, what's happening with the protectionism, as well as the COVID thing, will definitely push localization. To your first point on what new skill do we have to learn, I think, it's tempting to say survival skill, but I'm going to talk about survival. Yeah, we all survive. It's about the thriving skill. And I think I will bring it back to some of the points I made earlier, which is you've got to be resilient. Okay, you've got to be resilient. And that sense of resilience is embedded just not in adaptability, which is obviously key. It's also embedded in being able to deal with the adversity of what is happening. So it means chin up, it means manning up, it means not wimping, it means getting a spine, it means taking ownership, it means having doing some action. You can sit on an armchair and critique everything that is happening to you. It means not playing the blame game. So it means really bringing a lot of responsibility on yourself to say, man, I will do something with it. Irrespective, I want to come out of this crisis with being a better, more updated version of what I went in going into COVID-19. If I fail to do that, then it's really my fault, nobody else's.
I think typically what you spoke, Life 2.0.
Yeah.
A question has come through from a friend in the tourism industry, and his question is, Farooq sir, can financial institutions withstand the impact of COVID-19? Question one. And question two, how they will contribute to the tourism industry?
So on the first one, financial institution, that's fairly straightforward. I think post 2008 financial crisis, most of the regulators had asked all the banks to increase the capital so that they could withstand a lot of the issues around non-performing debt and bankruptcy. So most across the world, most of the banks and financial institutions are far stronger than what they were in 2008. So by and large, most of the banks will be able to withstand this bankruptcies and stuff, because purely from a capital and liquidity perspective, they are in good shape. The thing coming to the point around intersection between tourism and finance, actually it's a really interesting intersection, because you think about some of the fintechs which are coming in. So fintechs was really finance and technology merging. But now what you find is fintechs are doing something called a platform. So you think about Alibaba. Alibaba started as a kind of a e-commerce platform, but they've now got into financial services. They've got into supply chain financing. They've got into tourism. So it's a good example of where they are creating these ecosystems. So when you think about the world of the future, one of the business models which is likely to emerge is how you will have these ecosystems created in many of the markets, which will basically dominate the economic landscape. So think about what Amazon and all are doing. So you only see parts of it, which is the sourcing and the fulfillment business. But as you read about the future plans around how they are getting into sectors, and what's interesting with all of these guys is they are using data. So back to your point on intersection between financial services and tourism, think about the data that banks carry on credit card spend, which gives you an idea about the spending habits, lifestyle, etc., etc. You think about how then you can tie that data up. So use the data which banks have on the spending habits of people, and then leverage it to how you can bring it into the sector for tourism to attract high quality tourism or medical tourism or what have you. And the key thing I mentioned data somewhere in the middle. I think that's really key. And banks and financial institutions have hordes and hordes of terabytes of data. And I think corporates and industries which start leveraging that data subject to data guidelines and protection, etc. of data will actually will benefit immensely. In markets like China, it's already happening because their data privacy laws may allow it. You're going to see that, I think, proliferate in other markets as well.
Thank you very much. A little bit of a question which is a little away from the ordinary, being asked by somebody that you just met a little while ago, that is Dr. Kamal Kant. And Dr. Kamal Kant has asked a very, very typical question. It is said there is either a woman or a book behind every transformation. What was it in your case?
I think you know, my wife being my anchor for me. I think Pradeep, you know Annie and really well, and
truly,
I think it's. But I will say it's been a combination of people. So I've had a lot of help in my life. Okay, I've had, without the help of my friends, my teachers, my bosses, I wouldn't be where I am. I think at this stage, I would say that if it wasn't for their guidance, or at moments when I thought I was all despairing and they picked me up from the dump and just got my self-belief going, I think like a lot of you, I owe it to so many of the people who helped us shape what we have. And one interesting project that I'm working on, I must share it with everybody because I think it's a little relevant. I think I might have mentioned it to you, Pradeep, is that
you did.
During this COVID period, I've now started making a list of people. It could be a client, could be an ex-boss, could be a friend, could be anybody who I've lost touch with over the last 20, 25 years. I've started making this list and I've started contacting them and talking to them, not an email or a WhatsApp, but actually talking to them, A, remembering those times that we had, B, trying to thank them if they actually helped me in my personal or professional life, and C, just reigniting some of the connections. Because one of my reflections, Pradeep, was that, you know, when you are living life on what I call the fast lane, you leave a lot of people behind. And perhaps when we are now slightly in the slow lane, it's time to acknowledge all of these people who had so much to contribute to each one of us, and thanking them and being grateful for it.
That is so beautiful. And come to think of it, who do I have a wonderful comment from? From our dear friend, Derek D'Souza from Pune. And Derek says something very beautiful for my students. And thank you, Derek, if you're listening in. And Derek says, there are 4 zones. There are 4 zones: comfort zone, fear zone, learning zone, and finally, growth zone. They are like concentric circles. And as you go from the center outwards, you learn and grow. That's a very insightful thought, actually.
Yeah, it is.
What do you have to say about this movement, right till the growth zone? From the comfort zone till the growth zone. Isn't that a lot of heartburn at the same time? Not so easy, moving from the comfort zone to the growth zone. Not easy at all.
Yeah, but I think that's where that's what differentiates the men from the boys. So I think if you are sitting at one end just complaining about stuff, that's one end. The second is where you take ownership and say, I will drive through what Derek has said, beyond my zones of comfort, and go through that, what I call rites of passage, to come out as a better, more burnished version of what you were.
So Farooq, when you talking about what Derek has just now given us, this input, moving from that comfort zone, fear zone, learning zone, and growth zone, isn't that what you actually reflected in your blog when you said, let it go, and sum of all fears? I want you to reflect on these two a little bit. Let it go and sum of all fears, the grand total.
Okay, so let it go, I think, is we tend, you know, we assume life is a journey, and we are passengers in that journey. We are travelers in that journey. And as you go through that life journey, you tend to acquire a lot of baggage. Okay, you acquire a lot of baggage, and some of this is emotional baggage. Some of it is your baggage caused by experiences, baggage of failures, baggage of things that you want to hold on to, baggage of things that you've acquired. But you almost carry this heavy burden on your shoulders. And the thing is that if you want to continue progressing in life, you need to have the habit of what I call decluttering, which is you got to kind of let go of some stuff. You are not, it's like a ship is not going to be buoyant if it's weighed down by anchors. So you've got to let go of stuff. There's no way you can create space for fresh if you keep hanging on to stuff. So some stuff is dragging you down. So negativity, feelings of guilt, feeling of inadequacy, etc., drag you down. So you've got to just get rid of the negative emotions because they don't really help you. Some of it is stuff that you acquired, the trappings of comfort, the trappings of material stuff, which is acquired, which kind of you hold on to thinking that's equals to personal success. So I would say that letting go has to be done both in the physical and literally in the figurative sense. And letting go, assume you're this bird soaring high, and assume you want to give wind, beneath your wings. If I use that analogy, the only way you can get light, you got to get light. You can't zip up if you don't lose a bit of weight. Whether it is physical weight, mental weight, emotional weight, you got to ditch it. You got to ditch some of the stuff which is holding you back. And I think fear and anxiety, coming to that point, is a very real thing that we as human beings experience. So, we fear for the future. We are anxious of the present. And this cycle of fear and anxiety will never go away. We will always find cause to, even if something gets fixed, we will fixate on something else to be worried about. That's the way human beings are built. So how do you break this cycle of fear and anxiety? I think you break that through a couple of ways, in my opinion. One is by putting perspective to your life. So I think if you look at life very narrowly, then you will live life in the weeds and you will miss out on the bigger picture. The second is, I think, just internalizing that fear and anxiety for what it is. And again, if I use one aspect of resilience, it's about saying, you know what, I acknowledge these fears. I'm human after all, but what do? Do I just sit on my ass and admire my fears, or do I do something about it? And I will bring it back. If there's one lesson I want to leave for myself and for everybody, is it's in your hand. The choice you make, the decision you make, that is your choice, how you choose to respond to anything. So yes, you are fearful, but how you choose to respond to that fear is your choice. And if you want to sit on your behind and wallow in that fear, so be it. If you want to take some ownership and do something with it, do something. So, and I think that's really the thing I would kind of tell people.
Farooq, tell me one thing. In your blog, you also had written something about rethinking of the North Star. What did you actually mean by that?
Okay, so what is a North Star? I think North Star is anything which is used as a way to guide. It's literally, North Star was used before by sailors to guide where they wanted to go. And North Star from a life perspective is what do you want to get out of your life? So if you had to write up your own report card on life, or if you had to deliver your own eulogy when you die, what do you think it ought to look like? Should it say, you work like a dog, you work 24-hour days, you made a gazillion bucks, you were a good human being, you were a good friend? What is it that you really value? And I think that's a very tough question to answer, because what you really value changes from where you are in your situation in life. So when you're young and you're started, you value a good professional career, you value material success, you value getting on top of the corporate ladder, you value that. But as you kind of go through your life journey, what you value starts changing a little bit. You value becoming a better person, you value having good friends, you value your health. So North Star, in my opinion, is trying to rethink what should we give priority to in our life. It doesn't mean that, we need to feed ourselves and we've got our families to look after. It doesn't mean becoming a saint and abdicating world life. But it means having a balance between some of the things which drive you on a material perspective, but equally stuff which is food for your soul and for your heart. And I think often, because we tend to become, focused so much on driving the professional aspect of our life, we sometimes forget that there are other parallel journeys that we are on. Our spiritual journey, our life journey, and these are all in parallel. And I think if we can give time to those journeys as well, not ignoring this physical journey, but also but not forgetting about these other journeys, I think then you come out as a more well-rounded, more balanced, and hopefully a better person.
You know, in our audience, as of current situation, there are a lot of educationists, there are academicians, there are teachers. And I am extremely tempted to ask you this question. On the 30th of October last year, you had written a blog which called itself Management Lessons from Parenting. Most of us academicians, most of us educationists who are in the business of making, may I say, men out of boys and ladies out of girls, what are those key things from that particular blog that you would like to tell us who are in the business of rearing the youngsters
So
in these current COVID times?
So, you know, Pradeep knows I've got two wonderful kids who are kind of now mostly grown up. And what I was reflecting on when I wrote that blog was that the way we rear our children up, or the way we actually grow them from infancy to young adulthood, and the inputs that we give actually have a lot of lessons on how do you become a good manager. And it's really the few things that I reflected on that blog were basically around the fact that you know, it's like it's almost like it's a tree of yours which you keep putting water in, and that tree becomes a massive tree one day. And I think as a manager, if you are able to treat your team members or people who work with you as people that you invest in, the way you invest in your child, right? So you invest in your child, you contribute to their overall growth. You just don't see them as worker bees who come in to deliver a particular result for you. And I think therefore a lot depends on how do you create that emotional connection with your team, and therefore invest in their personal growth to be able to actually help them in their own journey. And I think that's a really important aspect of being a manager. I think the second thing is when we think about the concept of blood is thicker than water. What does it mean? You know, your child is your responsibility, right? When a child is yours, that is your responsibility. You can't disown your child, so to speak. So similarly, when you are in a management situation, very often, sometimes, you know, as managers, we tend to kind of play the blame game, which is, you know, the problem lies with my guy. And you don't, as a manager, take responsibility of what your team has done. And I think when you think about it from the team's perspective, as a manager or as a leader, if you're not able to kind of shield them, or you are not able to stand up and take responsibility for their failure or faults, which might be the case, then often it's a question of playing the blame game, because it's more expedient to blame your team as opposed to taking ownership. And I think the key thing, Pradeep, I would reflect on is ownership. Children are yours, you know, it's a given, right? They are your children. If somehow you can internalize that into management to say, these are my students or these are my team members, and I'm going to make them feel that way. Okay, so yeah, I will have good days and bad days, and I'll fire them and I'll do all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
But they've got to feel that sense of ownership from me. I know people say keep your personal life and professional life separate. It's been very difficult for me. I don't. Frankly, anybody who's worked with me knows that I will get up and close and personal, and they will enjoy all of that which goes with it. But what it has meant is that it's allowed me to understand people better. It's allowed people to understand that you actually care, that you will take ownership of not just the successes, but also the failures. And I think it helps create that bond between a manager and the team, which helps you sustain through the life cycle. And I can tell you, you know, it might sound slightly boastful, so forgive me for that. But I think almost the vast majority of people who worked with me over my 30 years, I think I'm still in touch with them. Okay, I'm still in touch with the vast majority of them. And it gives me personally more life meaning. But I know more importantly for them, they know that irrespective of where they are, I genuinely wish them well and care for them.
I couldn't have really agreed with you more, Farooq. Just to share a small little anecdote from my own life. By Almighty's grace, I was in a position to straddle two organizations in my working life, and one was the epitome of professionalism, and that was Oberoi Hotels, and one was the epitome of humanity, humaneness, and that was ITC Hotels. In both these two organizations, I have seen where professionalism can take you and where this personal touch can take you. And there is a very thin line, extremely thin line differentiating the two. You don't really know when you go across on either side. When you said that anyone who has worked with you for the last 30 years knows that you will always go right up to them, up personal, whichever way they want it, positive as well as negative. Absolutely correct. One more question, and I think we are now nearing the end of our beautiful webinar. On the 30th of August last year, you had written a beautiful piece, which was yours truly. You had written about yours truly. That was your second blog. The first one being Learning to Learn. In yours truly, you made a couple of important insinuations to your own evolution. I want you to talk about that to my youngsters, how you evolved as a professional.
So I think imagine your life journey, and I think what I tried to put out, Pradeep, in that note was a few lessons in the corporate world that I've learned. And I think the first lesson was really about be yourself. I think, you can't go wrong. So, stop being somebody else, stop trying to project being somebody else. If you can just stay the course in terms of just being who you are, I think that itself is a very attractive trait which people will admire, which is your sense of authenticity. It is not easy, by the way. In a corporate world, I can tell you it is not easy being who you are, because you're very, very tempted very often to be what your boss wants you to be, or to be what the corporate wants you to be. But to have the courage to stand up and be who you are is not always going to help your career, by the way. Let me put it that way. But you will sleep easy knowing that you have not betrayed who you are. So being yourself means having the courage of a conviction, being able to speak your mind, but in a smart way, and not just trying to ape everybody else. It's difficult. It's way easier said than done. But I can tell you, over a period of time, people will admire you and get to appreciate that you are just an authentic person. You're not kind of aping anybody else.
And you did mention be authentic. Yes, you did mention.
So second thing I think was about knowing yourself. So I think that whole journey of self-discovery is not just an exercise to kind of inflate your ego, but it's really about just understanding, what and who you actually are. And very often it starts with self-awareness. So those of you who do meditation or yoga, then you know that it all starts with self-awareness, that who are you really? What do you truly bring to the table? And I think that's your start point to be able to then think about what strengths do you want to leverage? How do you get mastery on it? And how do you kind of evolve from there? The third one was really about stretching yourself. So what I meant was the status quo is the most insidious thing that can happen to you. So if you are living the life of a status quo, then my friend, you are in deep water. So you trouble. You have got to stretch yourself. So no matter whether you're 10 or you're 100, you've been blessed. God's given you the position where you are in. And I think you will be doing yourself a disservice if you don't push yourself beyond the boundary that you put yourself. So stretch, you are flexible. Your brain is flexible. You can do a lot more. Just don't take your current version for granted. The fourth thing I would say in that context is that you can only stretch if you unburden yourself as well. So lighten yourself. So it's not just about carrying the baggage of everybody's expectation on your shoulders, carrying all the emotional junk that you built up, carrying all the failures on your shoulder. It's also just about unburdening yourself. And I think finally, if there was somebody taught me something called rule number 7, which was a very nice rule. Don't ask me what the first 6 now are, but rule number 7 was, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't take your life too seriously. Okay. Have a smile, have a laugh. Some days you will have problems. Some days you will be golden. It's all right. Okay. Don't take things too seriously.
I can only say one thing, that rule number 7 is equal to Farooq Siddiqui, and Farooq Siddiqui is equal to rule number 7. It's synonymous. I know that. I know what I'm talking about. Farooq, I'll take one last question, which has come in from my champion basketball student. His name is Paras Chauhan. He's a fabulous basketballer. And he asks a question which is absolutely related to his profession. He says, good afternoon, Farooq sir. My question is, sir, can the tourism and hospitality industry earn the same revenue now if it starts operating after some time as it was earning before? And if there must be increase, then when would this high increase in price happen?
So Paras, what I can share with you, this is my limited knowledge, but a lot of the high touch service sectors, and I'll give airlines and retailing as examples, people are expecting that it's going to be at least a couple of years before it comes back to where it is today. So if you think about, if hospitality is driven by, in many ways, by tourism and by businesses, if on the business side, I personally feel travel is going to come down, therefore business travel is going to come down. And the same goes for tourism or leisure-based travel as well. So what I'm reading reports now is that some of these sectors which are more badly impacted, it'll take at least a couple of years for demand to come back to that time, unless people find a vaccine, which is a completely different story. But at this stage, people will probably put that 2-year time frame.
A couple of days ago, I was attending an important seminar which was being joined by some of the top hoteliers of the country. And one of the topics that everyone spoke about was demand destruction. Currently, we have been through a very bad situation of demand destruction. But in my very humble opinion and my last 30 years of hoteliering, I know one thing for sure, and that is human beings will travel. It's just a matter of time. Human beings will travel. And going back to your word, resilience, when they start traveling, this same industry, which is right now a little bit down and out, is going to bounce back and bounce back in double quick time. Thank you very much, Farooq Siddiqui. So nice of you. You have taken out your time. We have already overshot our limit. And on behalf of all my students, thank you very much, Farooq. You have brought a whole world of really thoughts from the heart to the table. Thank you very, very much. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, Pradeep. Pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye-bye. God bless.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.